Hello everybody and welcome to JTV. So over the last few weeks and months there's been, at least I've been picking up myself, a lot of concern from people in the Jewish community about the rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic incidents and riots and name-calling, much of it related to what's happening in the Middle East, or at least people are using that as an excuse to commit anti-Semitic acts of violence and hate speech. And there's real concern. People are saying, you know, we're trying to get over the facts and yet the media seems so biased and these people don't seem to get it, and you know, Israel's just engaging in self-defense, and there seems to be, you know, no matter what we do and how much self-defense we practice and articulating our points to the masses, it just doesn't seem to be working, and there seems to be a lot of despair that I'm picking up. So of course we need to keep doing all of that stuff of self-defense and giving over the facts and activism and advocacy and all those things. But I wonder whether there's something else that could be added into the equation that hasn't actually been proposed by that many people. And it's the following. I'm going to speak the idea and say it, and perhaps it might create a bit of confusion or skepticism or cynicism when I first say it. But I think it's actually a really important part of the equation, which is that we're so focused on fighting anti-Semitism. But what about creating pro-Semitism or philo-Semitism? You know, we're so used to, for the last 2,000 years, having been exiled and persecuted as Jewish people, we're so used to just being, having our very existence challenged by our neighbours and those around us. You know, there's a story of a non-Jew that went up to a Jew and says, "Why do you Jews build up such high, you know, walls and ghettos around you?" And the Jew said, "Who do you think built those ghettos?" You know, it was done by, you know, we were put in ghettos in medieval Europe, and we're so used to facing persecution throughout our many years of exile and dispersion. And so, of course, it's natural that we're paranoid. Yet today, the world has changed. The world is different. The world today is confused. Yes, there is violence out there, but actually there's a huge desperation, a crying out for meaning, for moral clarity. And I think today, the Jewish people, in terms of being out and proud about who they are, about our values, about our practices, we're a little bit nervous to do that, because we're so used to, like, what you're not going to kill us for being a Jew in the public sphere, in the public domain. We sort of have that embedded within our psyche, and it's natural. We're sort of like the shy schoolgirl that, you know, is going to the prom and just feels very awkward and nervous and self-conscious. But right now we're living in a time where actually there's a deep yearning for moral leadership and clarity. There's a vacuum of moral leadership today. So I wonder whether, instead of being a mystery to the world, instead of putting up fences, instead of being shy about who we are, perhaps we should show them what there is to love. Let's remove the mystery. You know, you can only love something as much as you understand it and know it. So the more we can show of who we are to the world and know who we are as not simply just a nation like every other nation. We're a nation that we're charged with a very specific mission, which was to be the moral voice of God to the world. That's what the Jewish people brought to the world. And the majority of the world believes today in the God of Abraham. We brought God to the world and all the values that flow from that. And Judaism is about articulating God's will for the world and sharing that with the world. And yes, our culture can be part of who we are and, you know, our national identity. But what about sharing with the world the things that God asks of us, our Torah, the rituals that we do, the values that come from that, the ethics that come from that? What about being proud about that? What about sharing that with others? Because there's a deep yearning for moral clarity today, for moral leadership. I think focusing on anti-Semitism is in some ways missing the target, because there are all kinds of hatreds today that are flaring up. We're seeing the rise of anti-black, anti-Asian, anti-gay kind of hatred. And what about instead of focusing on the hate of one particular group, what about focusing instead on pushing morality? We should ask, why are people committing these acts of violence and crime? A lot of these acts of anti-Semitism, they're just crimes. They're just people committing acts of violence. I wonder how many of these people genuinely have a deep understanding of who Jews are. They could just be doing that because that's what their friends do, or because they have a very shallow understanding of what Jews are, what Judaism is. Maybe it's because they were indoctrinated, and who did that to them? That should be a question we're asking. Who taught them to act in this way, to act violently? These are the moral questions that we should be asking. How did morality get so out of hand in society today? The purpose of Judaism, which is to introduce God into our lives and into society, is done in order to create a more moral world where people are accountable to God because they know God is always there, He's always part of our lives. It's in order to create a more honest, peaceful, respectful world. And the truth is, deep down, people do want to be good. People love to be challenged morally, and if they just have a bit of direction, if people just are given a bit of direction and told this is what's needed of you, if perhaps some celebrities would get involved in pushing this as well, so many people would switch in a flash. People are desperate for leadership to be challenged to do good. But a lot of people just don't have that today. There's a vacuum of moral clarity and leadership. The Jewish people need to go through a bit of a healing process. And I personally, from my experience in a non-Jewish school, learned, I guess in some ways people have, I speak to Jewish historians or people that are much older than me, and older Jewish people understandably have a much higher sense of concern, paranoia, but because I was raised in a sense in a very, had a very isolated Jewish experience, because I haven't had that history or proximity to more, earlier experiences of anti-Semitism, it allowed me to be more confident in my Jewish identity to non-Jewish people. And I found that non-Jews actually had a huge respect and interest for Judaism and what Judaism brings to the world. And we need to go through a bit of a healing process and realize that actually, we're worried that they'll kill us if we say that we've got a chosen mission to the world. They killed us without saying that when we were just kept quiet. And maybe removing the mystery will allow people to appreciate what we're really about. Now we really have the chance to unmute ourselves, which is perhaps one of the most common words of the last year. If you want to speak, you have to unmute. And now is the time for the Jewish people to unmute themselves to the world and to express Judaism to the world and Jewish values, because we haven't tried this enough. There's no need for us to water things down, to qualify everything about our particular mission, about our, about our history, about our values, about the fact that we believe God gave us the land of Israel. I think in terms of the Middle East, that's the only language that they really will respect there. They don't respect the fact that Israel's a liberal democracy or the United Nations voted to, allow Israel to exist. They don't respect that. They do respect a religious voice, though, a religious dialogue. Recently, in the aftermath of the Israel-Gaza conflict, there was all kinds of concerns of, everyone hates us, and that people were feeling despair. Actually, there was a poll that was conducted that found well over half of Brits supported Israel's right to self-defense. I wonder how much of anti-Semitism is actually, in today's world, just a lack of knowledge about who we are, about what Judaism is and what the Jewish people are. It used to be if we offered an opinion, we were killed. Now the world is crying out for a moral voice. And what is our message to the world? It's that God needs you a lot more than you need him. Because did you ask for this? Did you ask to be born? Did you ask to be placed here? No. So you don't need it. But God put you here because he needs something from you. Because before there was just him, and his aloneness was unacceptable to him. And therefore he created a universe so that would be something other than him. And you have a unique role, all of us have a unique role to play in building and creating this universe so that God can dwell in it to make this universe, our world, more godly. It's not about religion, it's not about being saved. Religion is very divisive. It's all about who has the ticket to heaven. That's not what Judaism is about. That's not what the Torah is about. It's about how do we bring heaven down to earth? How do we make this world more godly? And we all have a unique role to play in that. And that is our message to the world. Jewish people need to take a step back. We need to start healing. We need to recognize that though the world did try to destroy us, only recently they tried to. Now look at us. We're thriving. The word anti-Semitism comes from the word Semite, because we are descendants of Shem, which was one of Noah's sons. Shem means name. We call God Hashem, the name. Why do we use that word? Why are we descended from a man called Name? And why do we call God the name? Name means you have an identity. If you live alone on a desert island, do you need a name? No. A name is only needed when it's for you to interact with someone else. And the message of Judaism and the Jewish people is that God has a name and that God wants a relationship with us. He wants us to relate to him, so he's no longer alone on that desert island, so to speak. Anti-Semitism at its very root is opposition and a resistance to that message. But in the end, that message must succeed and it must be victorious because God needs it to be so. I'm Ollie Annisfeld and you're watching JTV.